The church smelled faintly of lilies and polished wood, the quiet air heavy with loss. Rows of dark suits and black dresses filled the pews, yet the emptiness near the casket was impossible to ignore. My husband's coffin rested at the front, and no one from his own family stood beside it. A sharp whisper sliced the silence. "Even in death, he's abandoned." The words came from Harold, my brother-in-law, loud enough for neighbors and friends to hear. A ripple of murmurs followed, shame pressing down on me like a weight. My cheeks burned, but I stayed seated, fingers tightening against the folded handkerchief in my lap. I glanced at the casket, then at the faces turned toward me. Some pitying, some judging. Would I lower my head and let their betrayal stand, unchallenged? Or was there a truth none of them expected? I was only 21 when I met Thomas. He wasn't wealthy, nor did he command the kind of presence that turned heads at a party. But he had something rarer: gentleness, patience, and a quiet sense of honor. Together we built a modest life. I worked as a nurse, and he ran a small repair shop on Main Street. We didn't have much, but what we had was ours, and it was built with love. From the beginning, his family never accepted me. They looked at my simple dresses, my second-hand car, and my humble job, and they judged me. His sister Susan once smirked during a holiday dinner and whispered, "She's just a nurse." He could have done better. The words stung, but Thomas always squeezed my hand under the table, reminding me that love mattered more than approval. Over the years, I watched how they treated him too. Harold, his older brother, strutted around family gatherings bragging about his real estate deals and expensive vacations, while mocking Thomas for playing handyman. Their parents barely hid their disappointment when Thomas chose to stay in town instead of chasing money. Still, Thomas never complained. He lived by his values: loyalty, honesty, and quiet strength. I admired him more with every passing year. Yet deep down I carried the ache of their constant dismissals. I wanted to defend him, to shout back. But Thomas always told me, "Linda, dignity speaks louder than anger." Then came the illness. Swift, merciless, and cruel. I sat by his side in the hospital every night, holding his hand through the pain, whispering stories to keep him calm. His family rarely visited, and when they did, they left quickly, uncomfortable with the sight of weakness. The day he passed, I thought grief would crush me, but nothing prepared me for what came next. Instead of mourning, his family withdrew completely. No calls, no condolences, no offers to help with the funeral. It was as if Thomas had never existed in their world. So when the church doors opened that morning, and only friends and neighbors filled the pews, my heart broke all over again. And when Harold's cruel whisper echoed through the sanctuary, I knew this wasn't just about grief anymore. It was about years of dismissal, of betrayal, of silence that had gone unchallenged. For the first time, I felt the storm rise inside me. The air inside the church grew heavier as the service began. The pastor's voice carried softly through the hall, but my mind barely heard his words. My focus stayed fixed on Harold. He sat 2 rows ahead, shoulders squared, jaw clenched in the self-satisfied way I had seen too many times before. During the first hymn, his whisper came again, sharper, colder. Thomas never left a mark. Nothing worth remembering. The cruelty in his tone made several heads turn. A few neighbors frowned, but none dared speak. My chest tightened as the insult lingered, twisting grief into fire. I lowered my eyes, letting silence shield me. Yet in that silence, my hand brushed against the folded envelope inside my purse, the one Thomas had entrusted to me weeks before he passed. His final words echoed in my memory. "When the time is right, show them who you are, Linda." The sea. Storm inside me swelled, but I waited. After the sermon, the pastor invited loved ones to share memories. A pause followed, the kind that begs for someone to stand. I felt Harold shift, and then he rose. His shoes clicked loudly against the floor. As he strode to the pulpit, he began with mock grief, voice dripping with false sorrow. My brother was simple, always tinkering in that little shop of his. He meant well, but let's be honest, he never achieved much. A low murmur spread through the pews. My hands clenched tighter, knuckles white against the handkerchief. Harold's words cut deeper with every sentence, painting Thomas as a man without worth, a man forgotten even in death. He ended with a smirk. Still, I suppose it's fitting he lies here, alone. Gasps echoed. Even the pastor's eyes widened at his audacity. The hush that followed was unbearable. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Every instinct screamed to rise, to speak, to tear away the mask Harold wore before this community. Instead, I sat perfectly still. My silence was deliberate, my breath steady. Because what Harold didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the truth I carried would strike louder than any angered outburst. I lifted my chin slowly, meeting his eyes as he returned to his seat. The smugness on his face only deepened. He thought he had won. But in that moment, I knew. The real funeral was not for Thomas. It was for Harold's pride. And soon, everyone here would see it. The silence after Harold's speech was suffocating. Some guests shifted uncomfortably, others bowed their heads, but most looked toward me, waiting perhaps for a reaction. I rose slowly, the wooden pew creaking beneath me. My heels clicked softly against the floor as I walked to the front, turned first to the casket, resting my hand gently on the polished wood. My voice trembled at the start, not from fear, but from the weight of everything I had carried in silence. Thomas was more than they ever saw. Gasps spread as I pulled the envelope from my purse. Carefully, I unfolded the letter and held it high. This, I said, my voice steadying, was his wish, that when the day came, the truth would not be buried with him. I opened the envelope and revealed the papers inside. Certificates, deeds, and letters of recognition. My eyes swept the room. Thomas wasn't just a man who fixed broken things in a shop. For years, he quietly donated his earnings to repair, homes for veterans, to fund scholarships for local kids, to rebuild this very church roof when the storm tore it down. The pastor's mouth fell open. A woman in the back gasped, whispering, "I remember those donations." But they were always anonymous, I nodded. Yes, anonymous, because he believed giving meant more when no one expected thanks. I laid the final paper on the pulpit, a letter of honor from the state, recognizing Thomas for decades of community service. The seal gleamed under the church lights. The crowd rose to their feet in stunned silence. Whispers turned into awe into respect. Faces shifted. Pity vanished, replaced by reverence. Then I looked directly at Harold. His smirk had vanished, his face pale as stone. His lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, the arrogance drained from him. "You called him nothing," I said, my voice calm, cutting through the air. "But it is your name that will be remembered for betrayal, while his will be honored for generations." The church erupted in murmurs of agreement, some even clapping softly despite the solemn setting. Eyes turned away from Harold, disgusted, and focused back on me, on Thomas, with newfound respect. And in that moment I felt it. The power of truth finally, breaking the silence that had bound me for years. The sanctuary no longer felt heavy with grief. Instead, it pulsed with a quiet reverence. Neighbors who had once looked at me with pity now stood taller, nodding in respect. Friends approached the casket, some with tears in their eyes, whispering prayers of gratitude for the man they finally saw in full truth. I stepped down from the pulpit, my hand still clutching the letter of honor. Every eye followed me, not out of curiosity, but with respect that had been long denied. Harold shrank in his seat, shoulders hunched, his face drained of color. The same man who once filled every room with his arrogance now stared at the floor, unwilling to meet anyone's gaze. His sister Susan fidgeted beside him, her lips pressed tight as whispers swirled around her. For the first time, their family name carried shame, not pride. I paused near their pew. My voice was soft, but it carried. You had every chance to stand with him, but when he needed you most, you turned away. Remember this day, because the man you mocked will be remembered, and your betrayal will not be forgotten. No one defended them. Not a single person offered them comfort. Instead, the church turned its heart toward Thomas, toward the life he had built quietly, humbly, yet more powerfully than Harold's wealth ever could. The service ended, and as the pallbearers prepared to carry the casket, I followed behind with steady steps. The sun streamed through the stained glass windows, casting warm colors over the aisle. For the first time since Thomas's passing, my heart lifted. Outside, neighbors gathered around me, offering hands, hugs, and words of comfort. Some even spoke of starting a memorial fund in Thomas's name. His legacy, once hidden, was alive, and it was mine to protect. I glanced back at Harold one last time. He stood off to the side, isolated, his once commanding posture broken. His pride lay buried deeper than the coffin we lowered that day. As the earth closed over Thomas's grave, I whispered silently to him, "They tried to erase you, but today, you stood taller than them all." I turned and walked away with dignity, my head held high. The storm inside me had passed, leaving only calm strength. Because in the end, respect cannot be stolen. It must be earned.